The city forced him to stop. Sterling Harcourt was unaccustomed to interruption. His nights unfolded with mechanical precision. Routes clear before departure. Schedules measured to the second. Outcomes anticipated long before they arrived. Movement was constant, seamless, unquestioned. Kings like him did not wait. Yet here he was, motionless in the back of a luxury sedan, as a red light burned above the intersection. The crosswalk signal changed. Human bodies flowed forward in a careless stream, ordinary and anonymous, moving with the confidence of people who believed the world would always make room for them. Then he saw her. She stepped off the curb more carefully than the others, adjusting her grip as she crossed. Her coat was worn, her posture protective, her attention focused entirely on the small weight pressed to her chest. Then another, mirrored, fragile, impossibly small. Two knitcaps, two peaceful faces, eyes closed against the night. Twins. The city noise faded. The hum of the engine disappeared. The future Sterling had so carefully constructed fractured into fragments that no longer aligned. The calculation was instant, brutal, unavoidable. They were his. For centuries, Sterling had ruled by denying moments like this their power. Emotion was a liability. Surprise was a threat. Love was chaos disguised as meaning. He had built his life to exclude all three, and yet the truth stood in front of him, crossing the street with no regard for the systems he commanded. Beside him, his fiancée continued speaking, her voice smooth and measured, unaware that anything had changed. Venues, dates, optics, every word fit neatly into the future expected of him. She was immaculate, tailor-composed, unchallenging. She did not demand emotion. She demanded alignment. Sterling listened the way he always did, attentively, distantly, performing presence without surrendering control. It had always been enough. His world was designed to be cold, perfectly regulated, untouched by consequence. The leather seat beneath him held no warmth. The tinted windows separated him from the chaos outside. Everything existed at a remove, filtered through power and protocol. That was the point. Courtney shifted slightly, scrolling through images on her phone, explaining why winter ceremonies photographed better, why tradition responded to restraint, why the council preferred certainty to passion. Sterling nodded at the appropriate moments, his expression calm, his posture flawless. He did not miss the way the woman in the crosswalk adjusted her grip again, shielding the twins from a night air. He did not miss the familiar line of her profile. He did not miss the way his past walked calmly through his present, carrying proof of a life he had abandoned. The light remained red. The twins slept on, unaware that the man watching them had once chosen control over love, absence over risk, silence over responsibility. For the first time in centuries, Sterling Harcourt could not move forward, and in that stillness, he understood that everything he had built, every illusion of order, every carefully chosen distance, had failed him at the exact moment it mattered most. Sterling Harcourt's life was built to function without friction. Every night followed a rhythm older than the city itself, a cadence shaped by tradition, power, and the unspoken agreement that nothing unexpected would be allowed to take root. His authority did not rely on cruelty or spectacle. It relied on consistency, on the quiet reassurance that the world would remain exactly as it had been the day before. The vampire hierarchy valued that above all else. From the highest terrace of his residence, the city looked contained. Lights blinked in orderly grids. Traffic traced predictable patterns, and human lives unfolded beneath him in brief, fragile arcs. They hurried, loved, aged, and vanished, all within a span that barely registered to him. He watched them the way one watched, whether aware, unaffected. Inside, the space was immaculate. Stone and glass, polished metal. Lines so clean they felt intentional rather than decorative. No clutter. No personal artifacts. Nothing that suggested sentiment or attachment. The residence was not meant to comfort. It was meant to impress. Courtney fit into it seamlessly. She moved through the rooms with quiet confidence, already accustomed to the scale and silence, already understanding which spaces invited conversation and which demanded restraint. Her presence never disrupted the atmosphere. If anything, it reinforced it. She was composed in the way old families prized, controlled, elegant, untouched by unnecessary emotion. When she spoke, it was with purpose. She discussed schedules, council expectations, ceremonial appearances. She understood the weight of optics, the importance of signaling stability to families who had survived by sensing weakness long before it surfaced. Her observations were sharp, her suggestions practical. She never asked questions that didn't have answers. That, Sterling had decided, was compatibility. Their engagement had not been impulsive. Nothing in his life ever was. It had followed months of quiet evaluation, lineage reviews, private council conversations, and the unspoken relief that came when a suitable match presented itself. Courtney's bloodline was impeccable, her loyalties unquestioned, her temperament ideal. She would never destabilize him. When the engagement was announced, the reaction had been immediate and gratifying. Approval rippled through the upper ranks like a settling tide. Futures realigned, alliances strengthened. A king with a queen beside him was a king anchored to tradition. Sterling had stood before them all, calm and unyielding, accepting their congratulations with measured grace. He felt no surge of joy, no anxiety, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had fulfilled an obligation. That was enough. Love, he believed, was an indulgence for those who could afford consequences. He had learned that lesson early, watching rulers lose themselves to passion, watching decisions soften, watching entire houses fall, because someone chose feeling over foresight. Sterling had chosen differently. He had chosen restraint. With Courtney, there were no dangerous expectations. She did not look at him as though she wanted something more than what he was willing to give. She did not ask him to be present in ways that cost him control. Their conversations were smooth, efficient, free of emotional undercurrents. Together, they made sense. That night, as they prepared to leave, Sterling caught a glimpse of their reflection in the darkened glass of the elevator doors. They stood side by side, not touching, perfectly aligned. A king and his future queen. Impressive, untouchable. He felt nothing. The car ride began the way all others did. Quiet, predictable. Courtney reviewed details for upcoming appearances, her voice steady and composed. Sterling listened, offering the occasional response, his attention divided between her words and the familiar comfort of routine. The leather seat was cool beneath him. The city slid past outside the window, distant and irrelevant. Everything was in order. Every piece of his life sat exactly where it belonged. For centuries, Sterling had believed that was the highest achievement possible. He did not yet realize how fragile the illusion was. He only knew that he was in control, and that control had always been enough. The light changed too late. Sterling noticed it in the same detached way he noticed everything. An update to the environment, a minor delay, nothing worth attention. The city did this sometimes. Human inefficiency bleeding into systems that otherwise functioned. The car slowed, then stopped. For a fraction of a second, irritation surfaced. It was subtle, quickly suppressed, but unfamiliar enough to register. He did not get caught in traffic. He did not wait at intersections. His movements were anticipated, cleared, smoothed in advance. Yet the sedan idled, sealed in glass and steel, while the crosswalk signal blinked on. White silhouette. Permission granted. People began to move. Sterling's gaze drifted toward the window, without intention. He did not expect to see anything worth remembering. Just coats and umbrellas, blurred faces, lives that would pass without consequence. Then the crowd parted. She stepped off the curb with a carefulness that immediately felt wrong. Not fragile, deliberate, as if her attention was divided, as if balance mattered more to her than speed. Sterling's focus sharpened before he could stop it. She adjusted her grip as she crossed, angling her body slightly, shielding what she carried from the cold. A bundle shifted. Then another. Twins. The words surfaced unbidden, precise and clinical, yet it struck with the force of something deeply personal. Two small forms, identical in size, wrapped close against her chest. Knitcaps pulled low, faces peaceful in sleep, unaware of the night, the traffic, the moment they were being seen. Sterling's breath stilled. The city receded. For centuries, he had trained himself to assess threats instantly. calculate probabilities, isolate variables, discard emotion. His mind did it now without permission. Timeline, proximity, possibility. The answer arrived before denial could. They were his. The realization did not come with drama. No surge of feeling. No rush of memory. It landed with terrifying clarity, like a truth that had always existed and simply waited for him to notice. Beside him, Courtney continued speaking, unaware. Her voice filled the quiet interior of the car, smooth and composed, discussing guest arrangements and ceremonial protocol. Sterling heard the cadence without absorbing the words. His attention was fixed outside, on the woman crossing the street with a life he had never accounted for. Emerson. The name rose slowly, heavy with years he had sealed away. He had not spoken it in a very long time, had not allowed himself to think of her beyond the abstract category of past decisions, necessary losses, unavoidable endings. She looked older, not weakened, changed. There was a steadiness to her that hadn't been there before, a gravity that came from responsibility rather than fear. She moved like someone who no longer existed solely for herself. She did not look toward the car. She did not know he was there. That somehow hurt more than recognition would have. Sterling's fingers tightened slightly against his knee. The sensation was unfamiliar. He did not remember the last time his body had reacted before his mind issued permission. Control had always come first. Feeling followed only if allowed. This time, it had not asked. The twins shifted again, one small hand slipping free of the blanket. Emerson adjusted instantly, shielding it with practiced ease. The gesture was intimate, protective, automatic. Sterling had never seen anyone protect something that belonged to him. The thought struck with quiet violence. Courtney paused, glancing at him. Sterling. He did not respond at first. The crosswalk signal began to flash. Emerson was nearly across now, disappearing into the flow of the opposite sidewalk, swallowed by the city as if she had never existed at all. Panic flickered, sharp and unwelcome. Then she was gone. The light turned green. The car moved forward. Courtney resumed speaking, filling the space again with calm certainty, with futures that suddenly felt hollow. Sterling nodded when expected, answered when prompted. His performance remained flawless. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. He replayed the moment with relentless precision, every detail, every angle, the timing that made denial impossible. The life he had walked away from had not paused. It had grown. It had multiplied. And it had crossed his path at the one moment he could not ignore it. Sterling stared ahead as the city rushed back into motion, its light smearing into meaningless color. For the first time in centuries, the future he had so carefully secured felt fragile, not because of enemies, not because of rebellion, but because the past had found him, and it was carrying his children. Sterling did not approach her. That would have been too direct, too disruptive, too honest. Instead, he did what he had always done when faced with uncertainty. He observed, from a distance, through layers of separation that allowed him to believe he was still in control. The city offered endless ways to watch without being seen. He adjusted his schedule with imperceptible precision, aligning his movements to places Emerson would pass through naturally. The route she took in the mornings, the small park she crossed in the afternoons, the modest building she disappeared into each night. He never stood close enough to draw attention, never long enough to raise suspicion. He told himself this was strategy. It was not. Emerson's life unfolded in fragments. A grocery bag balanced on one hip, while the twins slept in a double carrier strapped to her chest. A pause on a park bench to adjust a blanket when one of them stirred. The quiet exhaustion in her shoulders, masked by a patience that did not falter. Sterling noticed everything. She lived smaller than he remembered, not diminished, compressed, as if every choice had been filtered through the needs of two other lives. There were no indulgences, no wasted motion. Every action served a purpose. It unsettled him more than anger would have. The twins were always close, always touching her in some way, even when she set them down. A finger curled around fabric, a palm pressed against her collarbone. When one cried, the other followed within seconds, as though they shared more than blood. They were healthy. That much was clear. Alert when awake, calm when held. Sterling recognized the signs instinctively. His kind valued lineage. They noticed strength early. These children had it. What they did not have was him. That absence pressed against him in quiet, relentless waves. He had imagined abandonment as a clean-cut, final, survivable. He had not considered the slow accumulation of moments missed. First steps, first words, nights when Emerson must have been too tired to think, too afraid to rest. He had not been there. Sterling watched her one evening as she struggled briefly with a malfunctioning stroller latch. The motion was small, frustration flickering and fading as she solved the problem herself. No one stepped in. No partner appeared. No hand reached out to help. She had learned to manage alone. The realization hollowed him. Centuries of discipline told him to leave it there. Observation was safe. Knowledge without involvement. He could confirm the truth, calculate the risk, then retreat back into the ordered life waiting for him. Yet every night, he found himself lingering longer. He learned her routines without meaning to. The cafes she avoided because it was too crowded. The quieter street she preferred, even if it added 10 minutes to her walk. The way she checked reflections in windows, not out of vanity, but vigilance. She was protecting them. From what? He could not yet tell. Sterling began to notice the cost. Her clothes were clean, but worn. Her phone screen was cracked. There was a tension in her expression that never fully released, even when she smiled at the twins. Not sadness, pressure. The constant awareness that failure was not an option. He had known her once as someone who laughed easily, who believed the world would meet her halfway. That version of Emerson was gone, and he was the reason. The weight of it settled into him slowly, corrosive and inescapable. He had walked away believing distance was mercy, believing absence would protect her from a life she did not understand. Instead, it had forced her to carry everything alone. Sterling's instincts warred within him. One voice urged caution, reminding him of counsels and consequences, of laws that did not bend for human attachments. Another, quieter, unfamiliar, asked how long he intended to pretend ignorance was the same as innocence. He watched the twins sleep one afternoon, their breaths rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Emerson sat nearby, eyes half closed, her hand resting protectively against him even in rest. They trusted her completely. The thought struck him with uncomfortable clarity. They would never trust him at all if he remained a shadow. For the first time since the Crosswalk, Sterling considered what it would mean to step forward, not as a king, not as an authority, but as a presence. The idea frightened him more than rebellion ever had. That night, he returned to his residence later than planned. Courtney was already there, reviewing notes for an upcoming council gathering. She looked up when he entered, assessing him with practiced ease. "You're late," she said. "Yes," he replied. She accepted it without question. Sterling moved past her toward the window, staring out at the city he had once believed he understood. Somewhere below, Emerson was settling the twins into sleep, unaware that the man who had abandoned her was finally seeing the life she had built without him. The illusion of control was slipping, and for the first time, Sterling did not know whether he wanted to reclaim it or let it go. Sterling chose a moment when escape would be difficult. He waited until evening, when the city softened and people moved with purpose instead of urgency. Emerson followed the same routine he had memorized over days of watching. Grocery stop, short walk, then the final stretch toward her building. The twins were awake this time, their quiet sounds blending with the street noise, their small hands gripping fabric, as if anchoring themselves to the world. He stepped into her path without announcing himself. She stopped short. For a heartbeat, Emerson simply stared at him, her expression blank with disbelief. Then recognition struck, sharp and immediate, and everything about her posture changed. Her shoulders tightened. Her grip on the twins became instinctively firmer. "Don't," she said quietly. Sterling did not move closer. He kept his hands visible, his stance neutral, acutely aware of how threatening his presence might feel. For the first time in centuries, authority was useless to him. "I need to speak with you," he said. Her laugh was short and humorless. "No, you don't." She tried to step around him. Sterling shifted just enough to remain in front of her, without blocking her path entirely. The balance was delicate, and he felt it. One wrong movement, and he would become exactly what she feared. "They're mine," he said. The words fell between them with devastating weight. Emerson went very still. The twins sensed a change and fussed softly, their sound sharp against the sudden silence. She took a slow breath, then another, steadying herself with visible effort. "You don't get to say that," she replied. "I know." Her eyes flicked to his face, searching for something, certainty, perhaps, or regret. Whatever she found did not soften her. It only hardened her resolve. "You walked away," she said. "You made that choice. You don't get to show up now and claim anything." "I'm not here to claim," Sterling said. The distinction mattered to him, even if it didn't to her. "I'm here because I need the truth." She stared at him, incredulous. "You already know the truth." "I need to hear it," he said. "From you." For a long moment, Emerson said nothing, the street noise pressing around them. A car passed too close. A door slammed somewhere down the block. Life continued, indifferent to the fracture opening between them. Finally, she exhaled. "Yes," she said. "They're yours." The admission did not sound like surrender. It sounded like exhaustion. Sterling felt it then, not triumph, not relief, but the sharp confirmation of every fear he had tried to suppress. The timeline aligned exactly as he had calculated. The past he had abandoned had not remained static. It had grown teeth. It had learned to breathe. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly. "I didn't owe you that." Emerson shot back. "You made it very clear what you wanted when you left. And it wasn't a life like this." She gestured slightly to the twins, who had settled again, their eyes blinking up at her, unaware of the gravity surrounding them. "You disappeared," she continued. "No explanation. No goodbye that meant anything. You were gone before I could decide whether to hate you or miss you." Sterling absorbed every word without interruption. He had faced councils and rebellions with less composure than this. Her anger was not loud, but it was precise, and it cut deeper than accusation ever could. "I thought," he began, then stopped. Thoughts were meaningless here. "I believe distance would protect you," he said instead. "From my world. From what it costs." Emerson's expression flickered, not with sympathy, but recognition. "It did," she said. "Just not the way you imagined." She shifted the twins slightly, adjusting their blankets with practiced ease. The motion was automatic, protective, maternal. Sterling watched it with an ache he did not attempt to suppress. "They're safe," she said, following his gaze. "They're loved, and they don't need you to be kings or monsters or anything else." "I don't expect them to," Sterling replied. She laughed again, sharper this time. "You expect a lot of things without meaning to." Silence stretched between them, heavy and unresolved. Sterling could feel the choice pressing in from all sides. This was the moment observation ended, where distance failed. "I won't disappear again," he said. Emerson's eyes snapped back to him. "That's not a promise you get to make lightly." "I know," he said. And he did, more than she could possibly understand. "But I need the chance." She studied him for a long time. Not the king, not the myth, the man standing in front of her now, stripped of certainty, offering presence instead of power. "You don't get to decide what role you have," she said finally. "If any, that depends on what you do next." The twins stirred, one of them reaching up, fingers brushing her collarbone. Emerson's attention shifted instantly, her focus narrowing to them with fierce devotion. Sterling had never been the center of her world the way they were now, and he shouldn't be. "Then tell me what to do," he said. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Start by not thinking you're entitled to anything," she said. "Start by showing up, quietly, consistently, and accept that it may never be enough." The truth landed harder than any condemnation. Emerson stepped around him then, passing close enough that he caught the faint scent of laundry soap and night air. She did not look back. Sterling remained where he was, watching her disappear into the building with the twins held securely against her chest. The confrontation had given him answers. What it had not given him was absolution. And for the first time, he understood that earning it might cost him everything he had spent centuries protecting. Sterling learned quickly that intention meant nothing without consistency. The first time Emerson allowed him into her apartment, it was not an invitation so much as a test. The space was small but orderly, shaped by necessity rather than taste. Toys were stacked neatly against one wall. A folded blanket lay within arm's reach of the couch. Everything had a place because everything needed to be found quickly. Sterling stood just inside the doorway, acutely aware how large he felt in a space built for survival, not dominance. "Don't touch anything unless I ask," Emerson said, not unkindly, just firmly. "I understand." She did not look convinced. The twins were awake, alert in the way very young children often were, eyes wide, expression serious, studying him as if he were a puzzle they had not yet decided to solve. Sterling felt something tighten in his chest. He had faced down armies with less uncertainty than he felt under their gaze. He had no script for this. The first mistake he made was assuming presence was enough. He arrived when he said he would. He stayed out of the way. He offered resources without insisting they be accepted. He believed restraint would be interpreted as respect. It wasn't. "You can sit with them," Emerson said one evening after several quiet visits. "You don't have to hover like a guest." Sterling lowered himself carefully onto the edge of the couch, posture stiff, hands resting uselessly on his knees. One of the twins made a soft sound, a questioning noise that felt far louder than it was. He froze. Emerson watched him for a moment, then sighed. "You're allowed to breathe," she said. "They won't break." "I know," Sterling replied. But knowing and believing were not the same thing. When he finally reached out, it was tentative, his movements slow and deliberate. The child's fingers closed instinctively around one of his own, grip surprisingly strong. Sterling felt it like a jolt, warmth, weight, connection, something undeniably real anchoring him in the present moment. He did not pull away. That night, after they slept, Sterling remained seated long after Emerson had gone to the kitchen. He stared at the small rise and fall of their chests, counting breaths without meaning to. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to exist without planning the next hour. It was exhausting. Fatherhood, he discovered, was not dramatic. It was relentless in its subtlety. Early mornings, interrupted conversations, the quiet vigilance required to notice small changes, a shift in breathing, a restless movement, a cry that meant hunger rather than fear. Sterling was used to command, to decisions that reshaped landscapes. Here, nothing responded to authority. The twins did not care who he was. They cried when they were uncomfortable, slept when they were tired, reached for Emerson with unquestioned trust. Sterling existed on the periphery of their world, tolerated but unessential. The realization stung more than he expected. He tried to compensate by doing too much, offering to rearrange schedules, suggesting better security, proposing solutions to problems Emerson had already solved months ago. Each attempt was met with polite resistance. "This isn't a council meeting," she told him one afternoon, weary but composed. "I don't need you to optimize my life. I need you to be here." The word lingered between them. Here, not powerful, not strategic, present. He struggled with that more than anything else. There were moments he failed outright, nights when the twins cried and he stood helplessly, hands hovering, unable to tell which one needed comfort first. Moments when his frustration flared, quick, unfamiliar, immediately followed by shame. Emerson noticed everything. "You don't get to disappear when it's inconvenient," she said once quietly when he stepped back too quickly. "That's what you did before." The accusation was not cruel. It was accurate. Sterling stayed. He learned through repetition, through discomfort, through mistakes he could not undo but could correct the next time. He learned how to hold them without fear, how to pace the room when they wouldn't settle, how to listen for the subtle differences in their cries. He learned their rhythms. And slowly, something shifted. One evening, as dusk settled outside the window, one of the twins reached for him without hesitation. No prompting, no uncertainty, just a small hand extending toward his chest, fingers opening and closing with quiet expectation. Sterling froze, then gathered the child gently, cradling the weight against him. The child relaxed almost immediately, breath evening out, trust given without question. The sensation was terrifying. He felt exposed in a way no enemy had ever managed. There was nothing to shield him from the responsibility pressed so warmly against his chest. No distance to retreat to. Emerson watched from across the room, her expression unreadable. She did not intervene, did not correct him. She let the moment exist on its own terms. Later, when both twins slept and the apartment was quiet, Sterling spoke without looking at her. "I don't know how to do this without failing them," he said. Emerson leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "You already failed them," she replied. "That part's done." He nodded. "What matters now," she continued, "is whether you stay anyway." Sterling understood then that presence was not a single decision. It was a series of choices made daily, often without recognition, often without reward. It was showing up when nothing felt noble about it, when there was no ceremony, no applause, just need. For the first time, the weight of eternity felt irrelevant. What mattered was tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and the 1,000 small moments he would either step into or abandon again. And for the first time, Sterling Harcourt wanted to stay. Sterling had spent centuries convincing himself that he was nothing like his father. The resemblance, after all, was easy to deny. His father had ruled through distance sharpened into doctrine, a king who believed affection diluted authority. He had been a presence felt more than seen, a figure who entered rooms only when obedience needed reminding. Love in his household had been treated like a liability, acknowledged only in its absence. Sterling had sworn early that he would be different, and yet, standing in Emerson's apartment late one night, listening to the steady breathing of his children from the other room, he felt the lie of that belief settle heavily in his chest. His father had been there too, always present in body, always absent in every way that mattered. Sterling remembered the quiet of his childhood residence, not peaceful, controlled, the way questions had been discouraged not with anger, but with silence, the way approval had been given sparingly, as if rationed to ensure it retained value. He had learned young that being needed was dangerous, that dependence created weakness, that to be loved too openly invited loss. He had learned to withdraw before anyone could ask him to stay. The realization cut deeper now, because he could see the pattern repeating. Each time the twins cried and he hesitated, afraid of choosing wrong. Each moment he stood back instead of stepping in, telling himself it was respect rather than fear. Each instinct to solve, to command, to retreat into structure when emotion grew too close. These were not coincidences. They were inheritance. Sterling sat alone in the darkened living room, the city's glow filtering through the windows. Emerson slept down the hall, exhaustion finally claiming her. The twins had settled after a long night, their small lives temporarily at rest. He should have felt relief. Instead, memory pressed in. His father standing at a distance during formal gatherings, watching Sterling perform rather than participate. The way affection had always been conditional, earned through obedience, withdrawn through deviation. How silence had been used as correction. Sterling had told himself that he had chosen control. The truth was more unsettling. Control had been chosen for him. The thought that he might pass this on, that his children might one day learn to read absence the way he had, filled him with quiet dread he could not dismiss. Immortality suddenly felt less like a gift and more like a risk. Patterns repeated endlessly when no one stopped them. He stood and moved to the doorway of the twins' room, not entering, just watching. Their faces were slack with sleep, expressions unguarded in a way no adult's ever was. They trusted the world without understanding it. That trust terrified him. He realized then that his greatest fear was not failing them outright. It was becoming familiar to them in the wrong way, becoming the figure who was always there, but never close, the one they learned not to reach for. The shadow of his father loomed not as a memory, but as a warning. The next day, when Emerson handed one of the twins to him without instruction, Sterling did not hesitate. He did not calculate. He took the weight into his arms and adjusted instinctively, holding the child securely, confidently. Emerson noticed. "You okay?" she asked, cautious but curious. "Yes," he said, and this time it was true. Later, when frustration rose, as inevitably did, he did not retreat into silence. When uncertainty surfaced, he voiced it instead of burying it. These were small rebellions, barely visible, but they felt seismic. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Sterling spoke without preamble. "My father believed distance was strength," he said quietly. Emerson looked up from where she was folding laundry, attentive but reserved. "He thought caring made him vulnerable," Sterling continued. "So he never let anyone get close enough to test it." Emerson said nothing. She waited. "I've spent my life believing I chose differently," he said. "But I didn't. I just learned to justify the same behavior with better language." The admission felt dangerous. Necessary. Emerson folded another shirt slowly. "You don't have to be him," she said. "But wanting that is enough." "I know." She studied him for a moment, then nodded, then unlearn it. It was the simplest command he had ever received, and the hardest. That night, Sterling stayed awake longer than usual, listening for any sound from the other room. When one of the twins stirred, he went immediately, scooping the small body up before the cry fully formed. The child settled against him with a soft sigh, trust intact. Sterling held on, heart steady but heavy. Breaking cycles, he realized, did not require grand declarations. It required choosing differently every time instinct urged retreat. It meant staying when leaving felt safer. It meant offering warmth where distance had once been praised. For the first time, he understood that becoming his father had never been inevitable. Avoiding it, however, would demand everything he had once believed he could not give. The council chamber had not changed in centuries. Stone walls etched with sigils of old victories rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Torches burned without smoke, their light steady and unforgiving, illuminating the long semicircle of seats where the oldest families gathered. Power lived here, concentrated and watchful. Tradition breathed through every crack in the stone. Sterling stood alone at the center. He had faced his chamber countless times before, commanding, negotiating, enforcing. Tonight was different. Tonight, there was no petition, no enemy to condemn, no problem to solve without personal cost. The silence stretched, heavy with expectation. "You requested this assembly," one of the elders said at last. The voice was calm, ancient, sharpened by centuries of authority. "State your purpose." Sterling did not bow. He did not perform humility. He simply spoke. "I will not proceed with the engagement." The reaction was immediate, though restrained. A ripple of murmurs, a subtle shift of bodies, calculations forming behind unreadable expressions. "This is highly irregular," another voice replied. "The union has already been announced." "I am aware. The stability it represents is built on an assumption I no longer accept." The chamber stilled. Sterling felt the weight of it then, pressing in from all sides. This was the moment where kings historically corrected themselves, where tradition reasserted control, where deviation was reframed as temporary confusion. He did not allow it. "There are complications," an elder said carefully. "Matters of bloodline, of purity." Sterling met their gaze without flinching. "There are children." The word echoed, alien and disruptive. "A human," someone said flatly. "Yes." Outrage stirred now, less restrained. The chamber buzzed with controlled disbelief. Lines were crossed. Boundaries violated. This was not merely personal. It was heretical. You would endanger the throne. A voice snapped. "For sentiment?" Sterling felt the old instinct rise, the urge to explain, to justify, to smooth the disruption with reason. He recognized it for what it was. Fear. "No," he said. "I would endanger the throne by continuing to rule, without consequence." That stopped him. He spoke again, voice steady, unadorned. "I was raised to believe that distance preserved power, that attachment weakened authority. I have lived by those rules, and all they have produced is absence." He did not name Emerson. He did not need to. The chamber understood what was being challenged. You cannot bring them into this world, an elder warned. They will never be accepted. I am not asking for acceptance. Then what are you asking for? Sterling paused. The answer mattered. I am stepping down. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped. Warnings, threats, disbelief. The word abdication was not spoken, but it hung in the air like a blade. You would abandon everything, someone demanded. Your legacy, your duty. Sterling thought of small hands gripping fabric, of a cry soothed not by command, but by presence. Yes, he said, I would. The silence that followed was different, no longer expectant, but stunned. You will lose your protection. An elder said quietly, your status, your immunity. I know. And if the council moves against you? Sterling did not hesitate. Then it will do so knowing exactly why. He turned then, before they could recover enough to reassert control. Walking away from the chamber felt unlike any exit he had ever made. There was no triumph in it, no certainty, only resolve. As the doors closed behind him, the weight of centuries lifted from his shoulders, not replaced by freedom, but by responsibility of a different kind. For the first time, Sterling Harcourt was not choosing what preserved his power. He was choosing what preserved his humanity. Sterling did not return to the council chamber. There was nothing left to say there, no argument that would make his choice palatable to those who believed power justified all sacrifices. He left the residence at dawn, moving through halls that had once felt immutable and now felt strangely hollow. Servants watched in silence as he passed, sensing the shift without understanding it. He took nothing that marked him as king. No symbols, no regalia, only the clothes he wore and the weight of a decision that could not be undone. The city felt different without the buffer of authority wrapped around him. Louder, closer, more real. For the first time, he moved through it without expectation of deference, without routes clearing ahead of him. He welcomed the anonymity. When he reached Emerson's building, he did not hesitate. She opened the door with surprise flickering briefly across her face. She took in his expression, the absence of ceremony, the stillness that had replaced his usual reserve. "It's done," he said simply. She studied him for a long moment, searching for conditions, for hidden calculations. Finding none, she stepped aside. Inside, the twins were on the floor, clumsy with movement, focused entirely on a brightly colored object between them. They looked up when Sterling entered. Curiosity immediate and unguarded. Something inside him loosened. "I won't be leaving again," he said, not as a vow, but as a statement of fact. "There's no throne waiting for me. No council. No future that doesn't involve them." Emerson's breath caught, barely perceptible. "Do you understand what you're giving up?" "Yes," Sterling replied. And for the first time, the answer did not feel like loss. He knelt on the floor, lowering himself to the twins' level, letting them approach him on their terms. One of them reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve. The contact was small, ordinary. It meant everything. Emerson watched, arms wrapped around herself, emotion held carefully in check. "This won't be easy," she said. "I know," Sterling answered, "but it will be honest." The choice had been made, not in a chamber of stone, not before an audience of power, but here, on the floor of a quiet apartment, with his children watching him like he belonged. And for the first time in his long existence, Sterling Harcourt did. If this story pulled you in, if it made you feel something, pause for a moment. Hit like so YouTube knows this kind of story matters. Subscribe if you want more emotionally driven, cinematic stories like this one. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Backhand index pointing right, what moment changed Sterling the most for you? If you know someone who enjoys powerful, character-driven stories, share this with them. Your support helps this channel grow and lets me keep bringing these stories to life. The days grew quieter. Not empty, never that, but softened around the edges, shaped by small routines instead of grand design. Sterling woke to sunlight instead of summons, to the uneven rhythm of two young lives discovering the world one moment at a time. There were no councils waiting, no expectations demanding performance. Just mornings that began whether he was ready or not. He learned the geography of the apartment the way he once learned cities, by repetition. Which floorboard creaked, which cabinet stuck, where the twins liked to sit when the light angled just right through the window. These details mattered now. They were the map of his new domain. Power no longer followed him. Instead, trusted. It arrived slowly, without ceremony, in the way the twins crawled toward him without hesitation, in the way Emerson no longer watched him constantly, no longer braced for disappointment. Some nights they spoke easily. Others they shared silence, comfortable and unforced. There was no rush to define what they were becoming. Sterling did not miss the throne the way he had expected to. He missed certainty. The illusion that everything could be controlled if one simply chose correctly. Domestic life offered no such comfort. Children changed without warning. Plans dissolved. Sleep was unreliable. Love was not strategic. It was constant. There were moments, rare, quiet ones, when the weight of centuries pressed in, when he felt the absence of immortality's protections. He met those moments the same way he met everything now. By staying. One evening, as the twins slept and the city hung beyond the window, Emerson watched him gather toys from the floor, movements unremarkable and unhurried. "You're different," she said. Sterling considered that, then nodded. So is the future. The legacy he was building would never be carved in stone or recorded in council archives. It would exist in memories, in presence, in the certainty that when he was needed, he did not turn away. For the first time, that was enough. And for the first time, it was real.